and I'd like to extend my thanks to our kind host for the invite to be here today. So my exam question, as it were, relates to greening the capital markets, and specifically why it's important and how is this happening. So to speak to the first of those questions, why is greening the capital markets important? I want to make a couple of observations. So the first is, as we've already heard, this represents an enormous opportunity. This opportunity doesn't respect national or even regional boundaries. I think that's important to point out. So as we heard from the ambassador and the governor this morning, the last 18 months have seen a new set of policy foundations laid down that set a direction for the world economy. We've effectively had a signal, a bold signal for a new direction for the financial system. World leaders have agreed to sustainable development goals and have ratified the Paris Agreement on climate change. And this, in essence, plots out an annual investment pipeline that's measured in the trillions of dollars. And these all address social and environmental issues. So to achieve these goals, as we've already heard several times, is going to require an unprecedented amount of money. And that unprecedented amount of money represents a unique opportunity for the financial system. We're talking about $90 trillion over the next 15 years. So we know that these global policy foundations have been laid down. So the next step is the practical task of thinking about how we mobilize that money. We've already heard this morning that the funds that are flowing are basically wholly inadequate. And so in order to mobilize and reallocate those funds, we're going to need to green capital markets. Capital markets are a major artery of the financial system. The second reason that capital markets are important, and this is with the caveat that there is no silver bullet, is they provide a number of levers to deliver sustainable development. So a fundamental problem with capital markets is that they misallocate capital. So broadly speaking, through the lens of sustainability, capital markets can do three things. So firstly, they can raise capital for sustainable uses. Secondly, they can move capital, shift capital from less sustainable to more sustainable activities by adjusting the cost of capital and doing that by addressing inefficiencies and failures. And third, through capital markets, you can harness the stewardship capabilities of investors, and this is generally through the ownership rights associated with certain type of equities. So there are a bunch of reasons about why we should green capital markets, why we should green capital markets. And the second bit is why is this already happening? This is the second part of the question. So I think there's a growing voice that would back the notion that the economic system of today is in part broken. That there's a lot of good news around, and we've heard some of it this morning. But there are major failings in the system which manifest themselves in different ways. So to give you some example, every single year there are 6.5 million premature deaths from pollution linked to our global energy system. 21 of the world's 37 largest aquifers have gone beyond their sustainability tipping point. The World Meteorological Organization announced in, I think, March this year that 2016, last year, was the warmest year on record, 1.1 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial average. And NASA have calculated that 9 out of the 10 warmest years on record have taken place since the year 2000. So effectively, if you want to change the economic system, you have to change the financial system, as that is the cornerstone of it. And if we want to change the financial system, we need to move from this mentality of incrementalism to one of system change. We need to think about greening the system, not just about individual projects. So it's very important to think about greening capital markets at a sort of higher level. And I think on this point, it's interesting to note that finance is one of the few sectors that you could argue has been given a free ride through a sustainability lens. If you think of other sectors through the lens of sustainability, we don't think of cars, but we think of mobility systems. We don't think of solar panels, but we think of energy systems. And I think we need to adopt that mentality to the world of finance and start thinking about finance systems to bring about change we need in the time and at the scale available. I think a second reason that we're seeing greening of the capital markets is the more effective and efficient interplay between public and private sectors. And I think the green bond story, which we have heard about and undoubtedly will hear more about, is a great story of change. It was catalyzed by development banks who made a few demonstration issues that built capacity and confidence. And then the reason it scaled was an interplay between private innovation and public enterprise. We saw private market-based actors coming up with principles and guidelines and providing the demand. But at the same time, there was regulatory frameworks created by China and India and others, definitions created, typologies. And as I say, it wasn't just one group of actors, it was the effective interplay between a bunch which helped scale. A final reason that capital markets are becoming green is that sustainability more broadly and green issues are effectively becoming a competitive factor in the world's financial centers. So obviously we've heard about the AIFC, but we're also seeing the same thing in Paris, in London, in Marrakesh, in Singapore and Nairobi. And financial centers are experimenting and thinking about how to develop the rules, the incentives, and the market-based activities to green their financial centers. And the G7 last week at a meeting that I understand Alessandro was attending acknowledged the pivotal role that financial centers are going to play in sustainable finance. And Italy, just last Thursday, I think, offered to host the very first meeting to try and understand how financial centers can cooperate and make sustainability a pre-competitive issue. So I think in the interest of time, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.